you should probably not attend. You can also not broadcast your video if you don't want your video to be shown in a recording. And also it's suggested that you keep children out of the video.
How do you do a still image, Dirk?
You just turn off your camera.
Okay.
Dirk, would you mind posting that in the chat if you haven't already? Thank you. Connor says they're going to be a few minutes. So if you need to go get water or something, feel free and come on back. You know, when we're in the temple, we do a song while we're waiting for the Lama. I wonder if anybody would like to lead us in that song while we're waiting.
I'll do that. Sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I think you got muted. Can you unmute yourself? Sorry.
I think they did it. I think that whoever's administrating did it, so maybe Lama's coming on soon.
Nope, no, go ahead. It was an accidental work on my part.
I thought I got lucky.
Welcome, Lama Jinpa. Well, we just finished the prayer to Lama Tsongkhapa, and it looks like Lama Jinpa has joined us. So waiting on your direction, Lama, we will wait to start the prayers.
Did mix it?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, good. Please start.
Okay. By your leave, Umse, Roberta.
Are the prayers being put up? Or oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. Welcome, everybody. Teacher, foe destroyer, thus gone, fully and perfectly awakened Buddha, endowed with knowledge and good conduct, gone to bliss, knower of the world, helmsman of ordinary beings to be tamed, supreme one, teacher of all gods and men, Buddha, foe destroyer, glorious victorious one, Shakyamuni, to you I pay homage, make offerings, and go for refuge. Teacher, foe destroyer, thus gone, fully and perfectly awakened Buddha, endowed with knowledge and good conduct, gone to bliss, knower of the world, helmsman of ordinary beings to be tamed, supreme one, teacher of all gods and men, Buddha, foe destroyer, glorious victorious one, Shakyamuni, to you I pay homage, make offerings, and go for refuge. Teacher, foe destroyer, thus gone, fully and perfectly awakened Buddha, endowed with knowledge and good conduct, gone to bliss, knower of the world, helmsman of ordinary beings to be tamed, supreme one, teacher of all gods and men, Buddha, foe destroyer, glorious victorious one, Shakyamuni, to you I pay homage, make offerings, and go for refuge. When you, chief of humans, were born, you took 7 steps on this great earth, and you said, I am supreme in this world. To you who were wise at that time, I prostrate. Completely pure body, supremely fine form, ocean of wisdom like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, supreme protector, to you I prostrate. Endowed with the supreme marks, a face like the stainless moon, a color like gold, to you I pay homage. The 3 worlds are not like you, who is free from dust, matchless one. Endowed with knowledge, to you I prostrate. Protector endowed with great compassion, omniscient teacher, field of ocean-like merits and good qualities, to the thus gone I prostrate. Through purity, free from attachment, through virtue, releases from evil gone realms, unique, supreme, ultimate meaning, to the Dharma that brings peace I prostrate. From freedom, teaching the path, well abiding in the pure trainings, holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha also I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 ever devout homage, to all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms atoms, in all aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous action, accumulate virtue and goodness. Subdue your own mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Like a star, a mirage, a lamp, illusions, drops of dew, bubbles, dreams, lightning, and clouds. Look at all conditioned phenomena as such. Due to this merit, having attained the state of the all-seeing and thereby subduing the enemies of faults, may I liberate migrators from the ocean of existence, stirred by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. I take refuge in the Guru, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Guru, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Guru, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the positive potential I create by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the joyful happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from holding some close and others distant. Respectfully, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I confess all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the virtuous actions of all ordinary and noble beings. Please, Buddha, remain as our guide and turn the wheel of Dharma until samsara ends. Through the merit created by myself and others, may the two bodhicittas ripen. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. This offering I make of a precious jeweled mandala, together with pure offerings of and wealth, and the virtues we have collected throughout the 3 times with our body, speech, and mind. O my masters, my yidams, and the 3 precious jewels, I offer all to you with unwavering faith. Accepting these out of your boundless compassion, please send forth waves of your blessings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Nirtayami. The Heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on massive Vulture's Mountain on Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly, beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on and up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on and up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly completely awaken to the unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata, Gate Gate, Perigate, Perisam Gate, Bodhisoha. Please recite this to yourself now. Tayata gate gate perigate perisamgate bodhisoha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan.
Good morning. People that help make this possible. Connor's helping me with technical things. Thank you, Roberta. Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone, for coming on. I'd like to thank Autumn. We have this wonderful backdrop now. Actually looks like I'm in the temple, but actually I'm at Middle Way Health in our studio, our Dharma studio. Before I talk about the topic, I want to emphasize for the people listening that we're doing what's called Vajrayana or Tantra. Vajrayana sometimes is translated as diamond way or indestructible vehicle. Tantra means to weave, to bring together. So the formal name for what we do is sometimes called Anuttara Tantra Yoga, highest tantric yoga. So it's okay to tell people we're doing yoga because we are doing yoga. We do physical yoga too. Generally, it's taught in retreat and later in practice because the yogas sometimes called nickname Salung practice are very energetic, and the idea is that we've had some training, a lot of training already in meditation and ethics and in insight practice. So generally in our tradition, these intense energy practices are taught after someone has some competence in these areas, particularly the ethical area. So Vajrayana is a unique form of Buddha Dharma that arose in India and then was passed on primarily to Tibet, but also to China and other, and on to Japan. But I'd like to point out the characteristics of Vajrayana that I'm going to dwell on today, talk about today. An important part of Vajrayana you might notice is when we don't just take a threefold refuge, we take a refuge also in the Lama, the Guru. So in our tradition, we believe that there are a lineage of individuals that have actualized the training to various degrees, but are competent to teach and transmit the teaching. So we're not just looking backwards to the Guru and all the teachers and matriarchs and patriarchs that have gone before, but we also see that teachers are alive and living now that can give good instruction and have realizations and hopefully enlightenment. One of the important characteristics too of Vajrayana is that it's not just monastic. Vajrayana practitioners include yogis, people traditionally sometimes called Nagpas. And yogis are, could be monks or nuns, but when we say Nagpas, we would usually mean people that are not living in any fixed community, but doing deep practice. So they're not quite households that are doing traditional householders of raising families, although they might be, but they're doing intense practice while at the same time in society or wandering around. So hopefully we have some yogis in the Sangha. I like to believe that we are Yogi Sangha. However, the kind of yogis that we read about that are very famous, like Milarepa and Shabkar, are very difficult to do. So it'd be very difficult to live outside and to just get by on the gratitude of others. It's nice to have a yogi and be a yogi and have a job. The other characteristic that is Vajrayana and is particularly important in modern life and around the world now, that's characteristic is and growing is the stronger role of women in the Sangha. One of the root tantric vows, or a downfall of a tantric vow, it starts at criticizing or disparaging your guru and ends with criticizing or disparaging women. So in Asia, of course, and now that ideal hasn't always been realized, but it's seen that women practitioners, men practitioners have the same capacities. And in fact, Guru Rinpoche Padmasambhava said, if a female practitioner wants to practice lots of times, or may turn out better than men. So that was definitely the case with his famous student, Yeshe Tsogyal. It's because of Yeshe Tsogyal that we have many of the teachings from Guru Rinpoche, the first transmission, authentic transmission of Dharma to Tibet. And of course, here in the West, particularly in America, probably Pema Chodron is as well known as probably most as well known as any other practitioner, and has done great benefit. And of course, Tibetan children from Sravasti Abbey and many other wonderful women practitioners who are actually here in our Alliance with Sangha. So the Vajrayana practice, to be authentic, has to include women's practice and sometimes includes consort practice. We won't get into today, but just mention that. So that's a very important characteristic. The other part that's people notice Vajrayana practice is a big emphasis on visualization, on using, working with form, working with art, working with creativity, so that we embrace and want to refine the imaginal world. I'm using the imaginal world in a positive way, not the way Jay Garfield, who some of you are listening to, Garfield, who's using the imaginal world for the delusional world. I like to call the delusional world, and the imaginal world a positive world in this case. Another very strong characteristic that we noticed just from doing the Heart Sutra was the use of mantra. Mantra is sometimes translated in Sanskrit as protection of the mind. The Tibetans translated it, literally comes out as magical spell. So that sounds very a little Wicca-esque, but the idea there is that language and the use of language is extremely important. What we say does matter. Language and thought does have an impact on our behavior, particularly language. And it comes down to the fact that the Buddhas can really only teach. So language is extremely important. I'm fond of quoting a kind of poem or gatha from the Buddha. It goes something like this in translation: the Buddhas do not wash away sins with water. The Buddhas do not heal by laying on of hands. The Buddhas cannot transfer realizations. The Buddhas only teach. This is extremely important because we are a teaching and healing temple and Sangha help. And our primary mission is to teach and empower others to function. So of course we do things too. We help people heal too, but we don't think that we're transferring our power to someone else. We help people look within, help people get in touch with their own functioning and their own power, and that's the meaning of empowerment. So another qualification or another interesting part about Vajrayana Buddhism, Tantric Buddhism, is we have these ceremonies called empowerment ceremonies, which somewhat of a misnomer, because actually in a ceremony you could be attending it, but you may or may not receive the empowerment. The empowerment really is when we decide to take up the practice and to gain some competence in it and use it. So we sometimes say, well, I went to this empowerment ceremony for Chenrezig or Tara or Vajragini, but we should say, I went to the ceremony where the empowerment was given the structure, or that the possibility for empowerment would happen. So if we're inspired to do the practice and we carry forth with the practice, then we're receiving the empowerment, so to speak. We're receiving the inspiration. It's interesting that, of course, the empowerments was generally around specific forms of the Buddha, but not always. Empowerments can be for anything, for texts, for our readings, like that. Generally, we don't say, well, I'm giving you empowerment and impermanence, but actually, we do receive empowerments and impermanence, and particularly now, during the time of this plague, during the time of the virus, if we're taking it to heart and working closely with it and trying to heal with it, then we are empowered within it. So briefly, that's a very quick overview of what's special from the Vajrayana point of view, those characteristics. But the one I wanted to focus in on today is the fact that in Tantra and Vajrayana, we use the term Blissfield Wisdom or Blissfield Knowledge. So we don't say just wisdom or just knowledge or just realization. We sometimes say, and generally say, the Blissfield Wisdom. Because in our tradition, we understand that when someone is in a place of love, in a place of real ecstasy, that has enough power when joined with wisdom, seeing things as they are, to really liberate others. So if we just have wisdom into the nature of things, but we don't have the blissful wisdom, the blissful bodhicitta, as we would say, then our practice is incomplete. In fact, Vajrayana people tend to sometimes criticize people that, what is called arhats. They'd say, well, some arhats, of course, aren't harming others, and they have the wisdom of emptiness, but maybe not exactly the kind of emptiness we'd understand fully, but also they're not adding that blissful, loving wisdom, loving to the wisdom aspect. So in Vajrayana too, and in Mahayana in our tradition, we talk about the two truths. This is a key part of understanding how the teaching and the pedagogy works. The two truths are generally said as absolute and relative. Sometimes using the word conventional for relative, sometimes using ultimate for absolute. We're still evolving how we translate words from Tibetan into English or German or French, something like that. I hope we never totally give up on discussing translations and words. They didn't in Tibet. They had early translations and later translations where they tried to codify things. In a way, this was cool because people could say, okay, this is what you mean by this, but also it led to some kind of a little bit static approach to the teaching. So actually, I like talking about different translations of texts. It's a little aside, but Dirk and I enjoy talking about different translations and looking at them, and that's a valuable thing to do. So an aspect of course, our practice too is that in Vajrayana, we do see the teachings as evolving. is that it isn't just like it was all said 2,000 years ago and that's the last word. No, the teachings are constantly evolving. We're constantly needing to bring them into current language, bring them into current situation like that. So that is a distinctive factor of Vajrayana, and sometimes people discover texts called dharma. Dharma means we're discovering texts that were initially planted by Guru Geshe and discovered later by disciples, and it is still going on. And it brings the contemporary awareness into our lives. So the Blissfield Wisdom isn't just the bliss of knowledge, the bliss of seeing emptiness or absolute bliss, seeing that completely open, unfindable, luminous nature mind. It does involve relative practice too. So several Sundays ago, attempted to talk about the experience of falling in love, the experience of falling in love for the first time. I'd like to add that, different kinds of love. We had a nice talk on love by Sarah last month or 2 months ago. I'm losing track of time. Hopefully we'll hear more about that, more from Sarah. So when we're talking about the bliss of love, it isn't just the unconditional love of seeing the nature mind, seeing nature reality, being free, being liberated, but it is also the personal love. It is also the falling in love experience that we have as human beings, the experience of mature love, where we've gotten to know someone and we love them not only in spite of their faults, but maybe because of their faults too. It involves the love of friendship. A little bit like, Greeks had some words too that's sometimes useful, like agape would be this kind of unconditional style of love, and eros being the more passionate style, and philo being, like friendship love, like that. We have that in Dharma. We do talk about that in Dharma, and it's essential in Dharma. And also in Vajrayana, we do talk about sex, we talk about bliss, we talk about energy. So when we're talking about the bliss-filled wisdom, it all comes together under what's called bodhicitta. And bodhicitta, of course, is the aspiration to be free, the spirit of awakening, for others to be free of their suffering and to enjoy their lives. The bodhicitta isn't just a moral aspiration, isn't just trying to be a good person or trying to help. And from the tantric point of view, it involves fun and play and sport. Hence the title of the talk today was maybe the sport and play of awareness. It involves enjoying ourselves and enjoying ourselves with others and hoping that others are enjoying themselves too. So the ultimate vision for Buddhism from the path of Tantra Vajrayana is that we are here to overcome suffering, but we don't stop there. We want others to enjoy their lives. We can enjoy our lives, according to Vajrayana, without being attached to delusional things, without having unrealistic expectations. We can enjoy our lives knowing also that there's birth and there's sickness and there's old age and death and there's taxes and there's political systems and presidents we don't like. We can still have a good life. So the idea of love here in bodhicitta does cover both the absolute love of loving things as they are, complete acceptance, complete unconditional love, seeing the nature of things, and conditional love. So many times people in Dharma come to too much of an idealistic practice and discount just ordinary friendship love, ordinary pleasure, ordinary relationships. But in Vajrayana, we're going to embrace that and see that as part of the path and a necessary part of the path. Traditionally in Asia, it wasn't talked about that much. The formal texts tend to be on the absolute side, tended to be on the training side, which is the absolute side, and not so much on the practice side, because that was all oral transmission. So if we just read books, if we just meditate alone, and we don't get to know people very closely, we're not also going to see the relative side of love. So a little bit, Connor shared with me some of the personal memories of J. Garfield, Dr. Garfield, and one of them was when he went to India, I think in the 80s it was, and was at the Institute for Higher Studies of Varanasi. He got very ill, as one is capable of doing when arriving in India, and I think he was in a almost passed out, something sick or delirious for a couple of days, and he woke up with this wonderful feeling of water and coolness. Someone was him down, and it happened to be Geshe Topge, who's an incredible yogi and lama who became his teacher. So that's not in the text. You know, you're not going to hear about that except through personal connection, personal dialogue, and personally being there. Likewise, you're not going to hear really about how people bring their personal love into their practice unless you get to talk to them. Because I've always been nosy and somewhat of a therapist, even before going to school, I wouldn't just ask my teachers, like, you know, what's the right way to meditate? What's emptiness? I'd always say, well, you know, have you ever been in love? And who's, you know, who do you hang out with? And I'd ask monks and men that too. So I learned a lot that way. That, of course, every teacher I've known, whether monk or nun, loved somebody and was in love with somebody or loved something. So I've said a number of times that you can't do Tantra unless you love something. And it's interesting to talk with teachers about their relationships. If they open up and say, yes, I'm married, or, you know, no, I'm not, or this is how I do things, the whole thing opens up. So that's been a big part of my practice when I've met with teachers and friends doing Dharma. I'd ask, you know, okay, well, we're talking Dharma things that are kind of textual, but how's it going? You know, how are your kids doing? What's your relationship like? Who are you in love with? So sometimes in the past, I've mentioned that, you know, when Chadgud Rinpoche and Jane used to visit in Sacramento, you know, I just say, how are you guys doing? And, you know, so we wouldn't be talking like Dharma stuff in that absolute sense. We'd be talking about Dharma. And, you know, I've always been delighted to share that, you know, Jane and Chadgud Rinpoche just totally real and totally, you know, present for each other. And they had arguments and disagreements. And they had to work things through and talk it out. And, you know, they had kids and, you know, everything. So the same with others. So my teacher used to, in Darshan, we would talk about the training. But when he started talking about practice, he'd say, well, how's your marriage going? So that generally reveals a lot. And that's something that we don't shy away from in Vajrayana. And that's one reason why my teacher suggested I go back to grad school and, you know, get involved and get married. And because when I first met him, I, of course, like many people, said, okay, this is great. I just want to be a monk and leave the world. The world's full of trash. And I wanted, you know, and just take me with you, take me back to Sarah J, la, la, la. And he looked at me and said, you're clueless. So you need to get a job for starters. And, you know, here's what you need to do your work. So I'd like to stop here. It's 11:45, 11:43, and take some time for some comments, questions, and even complaints. Thank you.
Lama La, thank you so much for that talk. It was beautiful. And if anybody has questions, feel free to just speak up.
Comments, it's okay, comments too.
You know, if we get a bunch of people, yeah, you can comment. I was really taken by the comment about the mantra being a magical spell.
Yeah.
And then also almost the other side of that paradox being that we don't we don't do healing for people, but we have this magical spell. Could you elaborate on that a little bit with how those two work?
When we say we don't do healing, we can't transfer healing energy. We have to help someone get in touch with their own energy. When we say magical, it's not magical. That's the way it's translated in English. It's not magical in our normal kind of Western style of magical. It means it's very powerful. So what's very powerful words are, words that we believe right away without investigation. So, of course, the very famous phrase is, if you think you can't, you can't. If you really decide you can't do something, then it's unlikely you're going to do it. And sometimes it's wise to think you can't jump 100 feet in the air, but a lot of times people are thinking they can't do something. So that's kind of magical, right? So that's maybe an anti-mantra like that. But the mantras, of course, mostly in Sanskrit, but favorite mantra of Trungpa Rinpoche was just like, I think you can just do it. You can do it. So even before what was it? Even before Nike, yeah. So he had it me for Nike. Maybe Nike stole that. They should owe Trungpa Rinpoche's estate, so many like that. So the other words that are extremely powerful that are mantra-like or mantras are, when you tell someone sincerely that you love them, or the opposite is when you've fallen out of love with them. So, or when you've heard someone has died or something. So, words and instruction, extremely important that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. There's more to be said on that, but let's see if there's other comments too.
This is Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Thank you for those comments. I do appreciate embracing the relative, as right now I feel like my life is steeped in the relative and I need to get some encouragement with that. And so I do think it's helpful to talk about our words and our relationships as part of our path. And so that was very helpful, especially during these times of a lot of uncertainty. So I very appreciate those comments. So thank you. I like the stories. I guess that's why I'm a psychiatrist. I like stories too. So I like hearing other stories. So yes. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes. If I could say more about that, is that practice, as I define it, is kind of our daily life, which is in the relative world. In our daily life, we're going to say, I'm working this, I'm seeing this, my kids are doing this, my husband, wife, friends are doing this. And that's the relative world, which is, where we hang out. So the relative world is all full of stories and narrative. So when people are talking to me formally, like in an interview kind of darshan, I always say, well, let's start with the training. The training is like, do you know how to do the techniques? Do you know how to drive the car? Do you know how to do the surgical technique? Do you know how to intubate somebody, as my wife would say? And I'd go, no, I don't. I says, well, you can talk to them and say, don't worry, I'm here for you, but you still don't know how to do it, right? So that's the difference between practice and technique. Technique, or the absolute practice, is you know how to do things within a set situation, which is essential. It's like knowing how to drive the car, but the practice is where you're going to go and why you're going. So they're both extremely important, but I want to emphasize that training tends to be trying to be perfect in a sense, right? We want to, like in the lab, eliminate as many variables as we can to see exactly what happens cause and effect wise. But practice in daily life has tons of variables. So we have to be able to keep to what our purpose is and notice what the variables are. So one word that in Tibetan Gelugpa is a word that is translated sometimes as conscientiousness, which is how sometimes daily life is talked about. In conscientiousness, we're constantly having to make decisions about, what's the best course of action, what's the best procedure, how can I help others? How can I have fun? So in training, in the formal training, we're just trying to follow it. you know, and a procedure, not trying to always think, well, should I do this or should I do that? You know, it's set up so that we learn how to do it in an absolute, almost automatic way. It's like learning how to drive. So in our tradition, we make a distinction between training and practice, knowing that, you know, the large part of life is practice. You know, maybe we just have an hour or two, or maybe 3 as yogis to do our training, but the majority of our Dharma life and our life is practice, which will never be perfect. So please don't try to make your practice perfect. The only thing that could be close to perfect is your training, but even then it's sailing toward the horizon. Yeah, so my teacher always talked, particularly in our tradition, talked relative, because we just say, just see the open dimension of the relative world, and you see the absolute. Easier said than done, okay, but we don't have to jump to the absolute world. The training helps us see the absolute world, because with training, you don't have to talk about a personal self, right? The whole training is set up so you don't have to talk about your own personal likes and dislikes, just like driving a car. You know, if you learn how to drive a car or do a procedure, it's not your likes and dislikes. But practice, daily life, is all about our likes and dislikes, but being mindful of them, because we're constantly having to make decisions, and those decisions need to be made with love, bliss-filled wisdom. Wisdom is practical. It helps you make decisions. What's the good course of action? Yeah. Sorry, reply longer than your comment. Appreciate it, Sarah. Thanks.
Lama, this is Karen. Can you say that again? You said you don't have to jump to the absolute world. This is what I ended up writing down. Don't have to jump to the absolute world. You can see through the daily life awareness. But you said it nicer than that.
So, you know, we have to train. Training is somewhat artificial, right? It's kind of artificial to sit on a cushion and saying, I'm doing this, you know, concentration, I'm doing this mindfulness, I'm doing this insight, I'm doing this visualization, I'm doing these texts. It's kind of artificial, right?
Well, I mean, if you do it enough, it doesn't seem very artificial, but...
You know, I'm not saying in a bad way. You know, it's something we definitely have to learn, right?
Yeah.
Language too is kind of artificial because we have to learn how to do it. But the majority of our life is practice, and you know, practice always has a personal sense to it. So practice,
and that's
always going to
that
have
meaning,
a personal journey.
You mean that meaning daily life and interactions with other people?
Yeah, it's always going to be about our relationships. So if I ask what someone's practice is and they say, I'm trying to be more patient, I'm going to say, well, you could do that on the cushion, right? You just concentrate on patience and you imagine getting patient. But I want to hear a story, right? So practice is tell me the story about, you know, when you were getting angry and what you did about it. And it has to have color, and it has to have, you know, subject and object and a verb, and it has to be involving other people. Because the narrative is what makes the difference. And that's why in Vajrayana, I should have mentioned too, along with words, you know, poetry and story is so important. And many times people express their realization, enlightenment through telling a story and you know, reading poetry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Looks like we have a couple of comments that were posted from Susan Farrar. I wrote, just see the open dimension of the relative world, and you can see the ultimate.
Yes.
And then from Charlotte, there's a question, and I don't know if she'd like to elaborate, but it says, are you saying that it isn't enough to learn how? You also have to do it.
Yeah, it is. You have to do it. So sometimes the Eightfold Path, right, that we're aware of, people couldn't remember the Eightfold Path. So sometimes teachers would say, okay, it's view, meditation, and action, like that. So I mentioned this before, but I like thinking about it. So the last time I saw my teacher was basically, 2 weeks away from dying. He said, "What's the most important, view, meditation, or action?" And fortunately, I gave the right answer. What do you think he said? Anybody?
Action.
Action. Action is the most important. Do something. Of course, it has to be informed. It has to have a vision. We have to see things as they are. Meditation means we have the stability and we have the concentration and we have the means to do it. But, do something. Now, the action doesn't always have to be, seeing something that we would objectively see in the outside world. But it's going to involve bodhicitta. It's going to involve the active side of bodhicitta. So it's very, Vajrayana is very action, very vivid oriented, very involved. So when particularly the geshes and lamas from Sergey have come, they're not passive people, right? They're high energy people. They're doing stuff, they're creating not just training monasteries, but also hospitals like Arja Rinpoche and places where people to be fed. So these are two key Dharma things. Like we're very much into hospitals and helping and healing in that way, creating conditions, and very much into feeding people. So in China particularly, not as much in Tibet because it's cold. I mean, everywhere, if you go to a temple, you get a free meal. That's one nice thing about the Sikh temples here in town, right? If you go to a Sikh temple, there's a big one in West Sacramento and also south on Bradshaw, like you're gonna get a wonderful lunch. Nobody's gonna ask you how to pay for it. It's great.
Lama, can I ask you one more question?
Yes.
Do you think that you're talking about, the kind of the formal practice versus, living in the world and that practice? Do you think that if people put, like myself, put too much emphasis on the formal practice and making it perfect, that it makes that whole, my whole mind just too tight? Is that where that can come from?
Yeah, I mean, we have to be careful. When they say perfection of wisdom, perfect means you're in the middle, balanced.
Okay.
Yeah, so perfect doesn't mean just the ideal. It means like the
Okay,
balance.
right. Okay. But what about that tightness? I just am experiencing that, and I just
that would be
wondering
an
if
extreme. Yeah, the Buddha lots of
Okay.
time not too
I'm
tight, not
slamming.
too loose. Yeah, so he's talking about the bina, the guitar, like it has to be tuned, not too tight, not too loose. So that's why the shamatha practice is so important. It's more than just not forgetting what we're paying attention to after being distracted and coming back. That's just one aspect. That's the non-forgetfulness, which is mindfulness. But we also need the introspection or the vigilance to notice whether we're in balance or not. And the two primary imbalances in shamatha, we're either depressed or we're anxious. We're either kind of agitated and kind of manic, or we're kind of depressed, just to use psych terms like that. So we're noticing right from the beginning and developing some emotional balance, actually. It's essential.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
When you said this thing that I wrote down, just see the open dimension of the relative world and you can see the ultimate, I was thinking that this unusual situation that we've found ourselves in over the last 2-3 months is really showing us another dimension of the relative. I mean, most of our interactions are like not in person. They're on another level, another dimension. And so the relative sort of has expanded, right? And I'm wondering, do you have any comments on how that might help us see the ultimate? How this change in the relative?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. So when we see the complete relativity of things, you're going to see the emptiness. So that's why, you know, one of the most beloved texts from Tsongkhapa is in praise of relativity. I like that. So some wonderful teachers and I've tried to emulate this as my teachers, kind of combine that insight about relativity with Dzogchen practice, and Dalai Lama does that too. So sometimes when we say look at the absolute nature mind, we think, or awareness or experience, we think, well, that's over here, the relative somewhere else. But we're just looking at the same thing from two different perspectives. Seeing things as completely relative, yeah, we're going to see the natural openness. So my teacher used to say, oh, like watching TV is like doing dream yoga. So yeah, you're going to see mere appearance. Mere appearance is relativity, because things cannot appear independently, right? They can't appear just from their own side. They can only appear along with everything else. So that's kind of weird, right? I usually think a chair could appear just as a chair, but it can't. It has to appear with everything else to be functioning as a chair. So that's why I say the best way to do things is to do everything all at once, because that's the way reality is. It all appears all at once. When we talk about the all at once appearing, that kind of language, then we're using kind of Dzogchen language, right? So it appears out of nowhere. In other words, it's always there. It's all at once, an all at once experience. But actually, when we're talking about things, how they're not, through a more Madhyamika scholastic point of view, then we're going to say, well, you can't find just a separate thing. But saying you can find a separate thing and everything is all connected is basically saying the same thing. I know you're studying and reading, so.
I was going to say, I'm not sure that I'm there yet. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so language is so important. You know, we have to be really sophisticated. You know, we say all these things, absolute and relative, and you know, and then we go looking for like it's some, you know, strange animal, right? If I just find the absolute, then oh, be all fine. But language is just pointing, right? It's a language game. So a lot of people that I used to hang out with in college were talking about Wittgenstein and Nagarjuna and things like that, and Noam Chomsky and those kind of folks. But all the language and all the study is always to relieve suffering and, you know, the bliss world. So it does have a soteriological point, right? And it is towards liberation. It isn't just information. You know, the Buddha said, well, I know a lot of stuff, but it doesn't, I could reveal a lot of stuff, but it's just, it wouldn't lead to liberation. I'm just talking liberation from suffering, right? So that's the most important thing. So whether we're saying absolute or relative, it's always like, is this the right place, the right person, the right time, right? That's
right. This is the right action.
Yeah, we always have to think, is the right person, is the person available to hear what I have to say? Is the timing right? Is it a setting where they can hear? Are they in one place? Otherwise, it's not going to be effective. So we're always putting those three together. So that's why we say the center of Shambhala is Kalapa, right? Time and place and person. Kalapa. They used to call it Kalapa Court, like King Arthur's court. He was very dramatic. So it's just Kalapa. Yeah. So it's a little after 12, so maybe one more question, and then people can have some time if they'd like to do some sitting meditation on their own or have lunch. Silence means assent. And silence means everybody's understood everything, which feels good to me, but I'll just check and see if anybody has a comment too. It doesn't have to be a question.
If nobody else does, I have one.
Okay, you're on.
The comment that you made just in response to Susan about Dzogchen appears out of nowhere, always there, and Madhyamaka, empty, can't find a separate thing. Can you relate that to COVID and how things just magically just all changed instantly, and yet there is also nothing there?
Yeah, I mean, if we go looking for an illness as a separate thing, we're not going to find it. And of course, one of the things that most people, not everybody, is brought into a greater sense of perspective that our actions are deeply affected by others. And of course, we usually think we're kind of walking around in our own little bubble and independently, and now we realize, well, this is stuff in the environment and the air, and things are happening very subtly, and we have to pay more attention. If we're paying attention, we're much more connected. If we're paying attention to the kind of the less of the virus, so to speak. But in our tradition too, we don't wish any extra suffering on people. So we could say, well, we really didn't need this. I mean, and we want to be healed from it. But we're finding some meaning in it by helping to see a bigger world and more connected and act less selfishly, right? That would be the idea. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, good.
Lama, this is Dana.
Hi, Dana.
Hello.
Hi.
I have a question. Logistically, when do you think that Lion Drawer will be opening up to in-person things? And do you see a gradual opening, or do you see just open door, everything starts up again?
I definitely see a long rim. I mean, it's gradual pathway. So, I want to be consistent with what other Dharma centers and churches and gatherings are in Sacramento County. So, don't get I don't want to be way ahead of everybody. Don't want to be way behind either. Probably we'll open up kind of silent opening for regulars, for refuge students and regulars to come, and we'll know who's coming, okay? If we open it up to the public, I think it would be very difficult right now. We have to kind of experiment with ourselves and, have the Christians, apart in a certain way. And, we have to have some kind of agreement about, people wearing masks. As you know, we're wearing masks for others, not for ourselves really. And so, where we sit with that. So we'd probably start out with, a small enough group, maybe 20, I don't know, we'd have to think about it. And then, like that, and then, gradual. So maybe if we bought a TV and put it back in the community room, the dojo, and we'd have 10 people back there, stuff like that. But they're logistics, and I want to learn from other Dharma centers and churches and what they're doing. But we will open up. Obviously, I'm hoping it's, I am hoping it's this summer, actually. So stay tuned.
So you think July?
Well, I'm sounding like a typical administrator now. Well, we're doing everything possible to follow, best medical advice and legal advice and stuff like that. I'm hoping it is. I'm hoping we know enough and people are well behaved enough so that we can do it, this summer, maybe July. I wouldn't rule that out. I hope so. I don't want to go, all summer. But we'll probably have, when you go to an empowerment ceremony, they pour some saffron water from a vase into your hand, right? That's the ritual purification. But now we're doing it quite literally, right? Maybe we will, just say, hey, please wash your hands and we'll take your temperature before you come in. I don't know.
Thanks, Lama.
Do I sound like an administrator now?
You sound like a cautious, still developing wisdom on it.
our first precept is do no harm. And if you got that, then try to be helpful.
Right.
And then bliss.
The main thing you're saying is we'll still have these kind of online opportunities.
Yeah, I want to continue it because, some people are, distance, and this really helps. And some people want to stay home, and some people, really just say, I, have someone at home that's at risk, or I have underlying health conditions. So I want to make sure there's the vaccine, and that could be next year. So actually, I want to do both at the same time. So we're not going to quit doing it like that. We're working up the technology, but yeah, we'll keep doing it like that.
Great. So for the refuge students, then you'll be taking attendance and marking who's attending for the programs.
Yeah, maybe.
It'll be fun, something fun to compare.
When I was growing up in Dharma in Boulder, I'll just tell a quick story. Then we should go. Is that there was a clerk. Use the English term a clerk, right by the door there, and would have your dues ledger. And if you wanted to go to a teaching, then you had to have your dues paid up. And you could pay on the spot. So if you were behind, they said, well, we'll let you pay right now. But that was serious, yeah. So
you also have to have like meditation hours or instructional hours or other things.
That's true. I don't know if you had Connor. It's like for his teachings, you also, before you were allowed to go in, you would have to have on record that you attended certain classes, or you had logged certain hours in, stuff like that. That wasn't made up. That's very traditional, actually. So, yeah, maybe.
Sounds fun.
Some people love that stuff, they're like, I did it, I got it, but I think, at this level, we just want to make sure you're kind of helpful and healthy, okay?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so let's do prayers, okay?
Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel Bodhichitta that has not arisen and rise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Shenrezhi Chenjin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. That's blurry. Perfect. May the teachings of the Buddha flourish, and may the upholders of the teachings remain forever. May all migrators achieve happiness, and may they fulfill all their temporary and ultimate goals. Losang, magical display of the deep awareness of all the victorious ones. Merciful giver of a stream of profound and vast instructions to the fortunate migrators, please remain always unperishing, unchanging, unfading. Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of objectless compassion. Manjushri, master of flawless wisdom. Vajrapani, destroyer of the entire host of Mars. Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the snowy land sages. Losang Drakpa, I make request at your holy feet. I guess that's it today.
All right, thank you.
Omahum.
Omahum. Thank you, Lama.
Yeah, thank you. It's fun.
Omahum. Thank you, Lama.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lama.
Well, thank you all for being present with us today. We didn't have any announcements today, so I don't know if any of the folks left here have any announcements they might like to make before we wrap up. Hearing none, I'll just say that on the Roar Dharma Center, we do have a calendar. So you can at any time go out into that calendar and see a list of the activities we have at this point. Everything is online, and in the calendar, you can actually click on the links to get here too. So nice to see everybody. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take any questions about how to engage with us more, or other than that, I'll just go ahead and close up this session in just a couple of minutes.